MGM was going bankrupt. The studio that had built Hollywood's golden age was failing, and its executives decided to gamble the entire company on a single film, $15 million, the largest budget in the history of cinema. And by the end of this video, you will understand why that gamble, and the chariot race at its center, saved a studio, launched a legend, and produced the greatest action sequence ever filmed without a single computer. Think about watching this film for the first time, the scale of it, the arena filling your field of vision, horses at full gallop, wheels inches apart, dust rising into a Roman sky. Nothing you had ever seen in a theater prepared you for what William Wyler put on that screen. Ben-Hur ran 3 hours and 32 minutes with a 15-minute intermission. Cinemas split it across 2 halves. Audiences sat through all of it, and then many of them came back. If these are the films that showed you what cinema was capable of, this channel was built for you. Subscribe before we start. We are starting at number 10, and before we begin, the man playing the lead was not anyone's first choice, not the directors, not the studios. In fact, 5 major stars turned this role down before Heston ever got the call. Number 10 tells you exactly how that happened, and why the man nobody wanted became the only man anyone can imagine in the role. Number 10, 5 stars said no. 1 said he didn't have the legs for it. Burt Lancaster stated he turned down the role because he found the script boring and belittling to Christianity. Paul Newman turned it down because he said he didn't have the legs to wear a tunic. Marlon Brando was offered the role and declined. Rock Hudson passed. Kirk Douglas was genuinely interested and was turned down by the studio in favor of Heston. And Heston himself was not even William Wyler's first choice. The director had originally wanted someone else entirely for the lead before circumstances landed him on Heston. 6 men had some version of a conversation about this role before Heston signed his contract on January 22, 1958. Paul Newman's specific reason has been quoted and misquoted for 60 years. The legs for a tunic, delivered with the specific deadpan of a man who knew perfectly well that wasn't the real reason. The role that became the defining performance of Charlton Heston's career was passed over by half of Hollywood. Sometimes the right person gets a role only after everyone else has decided it isn't worth having. And the director who finally made it almost didn't take the job either. Number 9, Wyler said no first. MGM made him an offer he could not refuse. At first, director William Wyler turned down Ben-Hur because he didn't think much of the script, but he ultimately decided that the story was interesting enough, and the biblical epic genre offered him a chance to one-up Ten Commandments director Cecil B. DeMille. Plus, MGM offered him the biggest payday a Hollywood director had ever earned up to that time, $350,000, plus 8% of the gross, or 3% of the net profits, whichever was greater. AOL 2 motivations, 1 financial, 1 personal. Wyler looked at the script and found it insufficient, and then looked at DeMille's 10 Commandments, which had dominated the previous 3 years of Hollywood conversation, and decided he could do better. The rivalry between the 2 directors was real and deep. Wyler signed the contract. He then spent 3 years proving himself right, while simultaneously being proved right by 11 Academy Awards and a gross that saved the studio that hired him. And to fill the arena he needed, he had to build something that had never existed before. Number 8, the largest set in cinema history, built on 18 acres, with sand from Mexico. An actual arena was built measuring 2,000 feet in length, stretching across 18 acres, with a central spina containing 4 30-foot statues and audience stands that rose 5 stories high. It was the largest set ever built for a film at the time. 78 horses, 18 chariots, 40,000 tons of sand imported from Mexico, and 15,000 extras were used. Unilad 18 acres, 5-story stands, 40,000 tons of sand, shipped from Mexico to Rome because the sand in the surrounding Italian countryside was the wrong texture for the horses' hooves. More than 300 sets were built on location at the Cinecittà studios in Rome. They were constructed following 15,000 sketches and covered more than 340 acres. The set for the city of Jerusalem took up 10 square blocks. The arena alone cost $4 million to build and film. It was dismantled after production at a cost of an additional $150,000, specifically so that other productions could not reuse it. MGM built the largest film set in history and then paid to destroy it, and the 2 actors who were going to race in it had very different relationships with horses. Before we keep going, How old were you the first time you watched Ben-Hur? And do you remember where you were, the theater, the town, who took you? Drop both answers in the comments. Because most people who love this film remember the exact circumstances of seeing it for the first time. Number 7. Heston trained for months. Boyd's hands bled every day. Neither wore gloves. The charioteers began training as early as February, as did Heston and Boyd. The former had the easier time, for he was experienced in westerns and has strong hands and tremendous shoulder muscles. Boyd's hands became blistered and bloody. We tried to loop the reins around his wrists, but that didn't help, for his wrists also chafed. We tried quite a few chemicals and ointments to toughen up his hands. At times, he had to stop practicing for a day or so to allow his hands to rest. Two men, the same race, completely different physical realities. Heston had ridden horses his entire career. Boyd had no experience with horses at all. His hands bled for months of training, and both of them, despite the pain, despite the available stunt doubles, chose to drive their own chariots for every shot that was humanly possible. Heston takes off his helmet just before the race. That was to show the audience that he was actually driving the chariot. Boyd kept his helmet on because his stuntman didn't resemble him closely enough. One man's face, the other man's anonymity. Both of them in real danger every take. And then came the moment that stopped everyone's heart. What happened to the stunt coordinator's son during the most dangerous shot in the sequence is something most people have heard about but never fully understood. That is coming at number 6. And number 1 is about the night Charlton Heston stood backstage at the Oscars holding a trophy he could barely believe was real. Number 6. The son was thrown from the chariot. His father thought he was dead. The footage is in the film. Joe Knut, the stunt coordinator's son, was Heston's double. During a notorious heart-stopping moment, Joe was thrown forward out of the chariot onto its lip. Yakima was certain that his son had been killed, but Joe managed to climb back into the chariot and retake the reins, suffering only a deep cut on his chin. The footage remains in the completed film. Yakima Knut was one of the greatest stunt coordinators in the history of Hollywood. He had spent decades managing danger professionally, calculating risk, minimizing it, building sequences that looked lethal but were constructed to protect the people inside them. And then he watched his own son get thrown from a chariot at full gallop in a packed arena and believed, for several seconds, that the boy was dead. Joe climbed back in, finished the shot. The footage stayed in the film because it was too extraordinary to cut. Every person who has watched that race for 65 years has watched a moment when a father believed he had just lost his son. The camera caught it all, and the man who built the sequence carried a different kind of loss throughout the entire production. Number 5, the producer died in Rome. He never saw the finished film. Executive producer Sam Zimbalist died in Rome of a heart attack during the shoot. He was 54 years old. He had been the driving force behind the production from its earliest days, the man who had persuaded Wyler to sign on, who had negotiated the studio's $15 million commitment, who had overseen the construction of the largest film set in history. He died before post-production began, before the editing was finished, before the score was recorded, before the premiere, before 11 Academy Awards were given to the film he had built from nothing. Ben-Hur is a fitting climax to Zimbalist's career as a producer. The tribute was published after the film became the biggest commercial success in MGM's history. Zimbalist was not there to read it. The man who saved a studio never knew he had saved it. Sometimes the people most responsible for a great achievement are the ones who never get to see it arrive. And underneath all of this, a secret was being kept from the film's lead actor. Number 4, Gore Vidal, wrote a secret into the script, told one actor, explicitly hid it from the other. Gore Vidal was under contract to MGM and brought in to work on Carl Thunberg's script. At the time, writer Gore Vidal was under contract to MGM and brought in to work on Carl Thunberg's script. Vidal made a specific creative decision about the relationship between Ben-Hur and Masala, giving it a gay subtext rooted in a former romantic attachment. He told Stephen Boyd, who played Masala, and asked him to play the scenes with that understanding. He then explicitly told the director not to tell Charlton Heston on the grounds that Heston would not be able to play his scenes correctly if he knew. Boyd played the subtext, precisely, carefully, in every scene he shared with Heston. Heston performed opposite him with no knowledge of what Boyd was doing. The dynamic you feel between them, the specific charge of it, the intimacy gone wrong, was created by one actor knowing something the other didn't. When Heston learned of it in 1996, he wrote a letter to the Los Angeles Times stating, "Vidal's claim that he slipped in a scene implying a homosexual relationship between the two men insults Willie Wyler and, I have to say, irritates the hell out of me." 37 years. The subtext was in the finished film for 37 years before the man at the center of it knew it existed. And while all of this was unfolding on set, a young Italian assistant director was watching and learning. Number 3, a young assistant director named Sergio Leone directed the retakes. Among those who directed additional footage was Sergio Leone, who was senior assistant director in the second unit and responsible for retakes. Leone was a young Italian filmmaker at the beginning of his career, not yet the man who would invent the spaghetti western, not yet the director of The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly and Once Upon a Time in the West. He was a second-unit assistant. He directed retakes on the chariot race sequence in a Roman arena while one of the greatest directors in Hollywood focused on the human drama elsewhere. Cora Leone watched how Wyler worked. He watched how Yakima Canutt choreographed action. He learned, in the specific hands-on way you only learn by being present on a production of this scale, what it looked like when cinema operated at its absolute limit. The man who gave the world the close-up of eyes above a pistol learned his craft among chariot wheels and Roman sand. Everything Leone made afterward carries something from what he absorbed in that arena in 1958. And then came the night the film was recognized for what it was. Number 2 is about the Writers Guild war that erupted before the film even reached audiences. And number 1 is about two men standing backstage at the Oscars, one of them holding his first trophy, the other holding his third. Number 2, the Writers Guild went to war with the director. Heston thanked the wrong man on stage. The Screenwriters Guild arbitrated the credit under its screenwriting credit system and unanimously awarded full and sole credit for the script to Thunberg. Both director William Wyler and the head of production at MGM appealed the Guild's ruling. Thunberg agreed to share credit, but the Guild refused to change its ruling. Wyler publicly campaigned to get Fry screenwriting credit, feeling that insider politics had led the Guild to give Thunberg sole credit. In retaliation, the Guild took out advertisements in trade newspapers accusing Wyler of trying to undermine the integrity of the credit and arbitration system. A director publicly fighting for a screenwriter's recognition, a Guild taking out newspaper advertisements attacking a 3-time Oscar winner, and through all of it, the finished film waiting while the people who made it argued about whose name went on it. When Charlton Heston accepted his Oscar for Best Leading Actor, he thanked Christopher Fry in his acceptance speech. Not Thunberg, the man with the official credit. Fry, the man Wyler believed had done the real work. From the Oscar stage, in front of the entire industry, Heston sided with his director in a credit dispute the Guild had supposedly already settled. The Guild's official position on the matter was not changed by any of it. But Heston's thank you is on the permanent record of that evening, and it remains there. Number 1, It Never Gets Old hat, 11 Oscars, a studio saved, a legend made. Ben-Hur won 11 Academy Awards on the night of April 4, 1960. Best Picture, Best Director, Best Actor, 8 more. Ben-Hur still holds the title of a single movie with the most Oscar wins, although it's tied with both Titanic, 1997, and The Lord of the Rings, The Return of the King, 2003. 65 years, 3 films, the same number. Nobody has beaten it. Upon meeting with the press after his acceptance speech, a reporter asked Heston backstage which scene in Ben-Hur he enjoyed filming the most, apparently alluding to the chariot race that had everyone in Hollywood talking for months. The winner quickly responded, "I didn't enjoy any of it. It was hard work." Heston commented to his fellow winner and director William Wyler, "I guess this is old hat to you." Wyler, a 3-time winner, retorted, "Chuck, it never gets old hat." 2 men backstage at the Academy Awards, one holding his first Oscar, the other holding his third. The studio that had bet its survival on a chariot race had been saved. The producer who built it had died before it was finished. The stunt coordinator's son had climbed back into a chariot after being thrown from it. The screenwriters were still arguing about whose name went on the script. The young Italian assistant director had gone home to make spaghetti westerns. Paul Newman had stayed home because of The Tunic, and in a Roman arena built on 18 acres with 40,000 tons of Mexican sand, without computers, without green screens, with real horses and bloody hands, and a father who thought for several seconds that his son was dead, the most celebrated action sequence in cinema history had been filmed by a second unit while the main director worked on the drama. That is Ben-Hur, the film that saved a studio, the record that has stood for 65 years, and the moment that never gets old hat. Not for the man who won it 3 times, not for anyone who watched it happen, not for anyone watching this now. Tell us in the comments, where were you the first time you watched Ben-Hur? The theater, the television, the town, and which moment has stayed with you longest? The chariot race, the galley, the lepers, or the ending? Write it down. We want to know. Subscribe and hit the bell. We are here every week. We will see you in the next one.